Welcome to the Takeoff Podcast, the go-to construction podcast for construction professionals seeking inspiration, education, or motivation for the next steps in their career. Each Monday, you'll be joined by me, Mick Donaghy, Managing Director of Gedden Executive Recruitment and a respected name from the industry. A construction leader, a business owner, or someone in the thick of the action. The whole premise of this podcast is for you to get something from it. An idea, a connection, a mentor, whatever it is, I hope you get it. And I hope you enjoy the show. Without further ado, let's get into it. Today on Measured, we are joined by Lee Lambert. Lee originally studied a Bachelor of Science in Construction Management at Leeds University. Lee has went on to hold senior level roles with international civil infrastructure businesses such as John Holland and McConnell Dahl, where he has held various senior level roles, including estimating manager, bid manager, and pre-construction manager. Currently, Lee is the bid and business development manager of a leading Queensland construction business called GCB Constructions. We're really excited to have Lee on the show today. Lee, how's it going?
Good, mate. Good. Thanks for the invite.
Have you brushed off all the cobwebs after Christmas?
Mate, the older you get, the harder it is to start the brain cells back up again. This week's been very, very tough. I think the first couple of days got home, just sat on the couch and the head was very heavy.
Very, very good, very good. So what we're going to do is we're going to start off the show in a different format than we previously started off the shows in the first season. So we've rebranded the show a little bit. It's now called Measured with Mick Donaghy. We're going to discuss the motivations, the methodologies behind your career, Lee. So we'd like to start off the show today by asking you, how do you measure success?
Success for me is never a short-term target. If you try and measure success on a month-by-month basis in construction, you're going to burn for people. You're going to have a lot of false indicators. The easy analogy against that is when people talk about tender strike rates. So everyone's saying, oh, I'm 1 in 4 and 1 in 3. It means fuck all. If you're aiming for big revenue and you're getting 1 or 3 on your small jobs, you're not getting big revenue. If you're then losing money on those small jobs, you're failing across the board. So there's no such thing as a short win in construction. So look, it's a battle I've had all through my career, particularly places like John Holland and McConnell Dahl, where you're kind of tendering probably 20 jobs a year, and they never come sequentially because it's big government projects. So you've probably got 3 on to go at once, and then you end up with a big gap and you've got to go again. So that's quite hard, particularly when you've got nothing going through the department. You know what's coming, so you're gearing up for it. But when people are walking past and you don't have jobs on your desk today, people can look at that as a failing. I always used to flip it on its head, saying we're using the time to investigate the job, find out what we can, understand who's involved, talk to the consultants, get that kind of prior insight. So yeah, success, particularly in construction, is never a short-term goal. I mean, even across the board, if you measure a CA on being able to buy his first 3 packages well, you'll probably find at the end of the job he's run out of budget because he's moved budget from somewhere to create a big win over here. You get to the end of the job and he's run out of money. So success is hard to measure in construction. It's not a simple demographic.
Yeah, that's actually, it's quite interesting that you say that. I'd actually never had thought of that before. Like, I was speaking to an estimating manager yesterday, one of the top construction companies in Australia, and he told me that they currently don't have anything to tender on this month. I guess the CEO or the directors could come down and really sort of bring the hatchet down on someone like that. But I guess you've got to look at it long term, as you say. You can't just look at it day by day.
Yeah, look, I'm not going to mention the company, but I walked into an organisation that had quite a new CEO, and he did the exact same thing. This guy flew in from Johannesburg. I went on a tour with him around Australia, myself and 2 or 3 other senior managers of this business. And he was absolutely seething because he expected to walk into every single office and see every single bum on a chair with a stack of jobs lists. And it really doesn't work like that. I mean, that's how you burn people.
Yeah.
Really, if that's how you operate in your business.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it took him, and he wasn't from a construction background. He was a very, very senior kind of executive level guy, but he'd come from a completely different industry.
Yeah.
But he learned the benefit.
Yeah.
It takes us all a while to learn things, but once he understood the benefit in it, and then he saw how hard people are working when the work is there, he really changed his understanding, and that was part of his learning curve in the industry as well.
Yeah, yeah. No, that's a pretty interesting story. I know that there's quite a number of new CEOs come from, might be sort of financial backgrounds or accountancy or something like that come in and try and treat the construction industry like the industry that they come through from before, which from what I know, it doesn't work.
I can tell you, being a POM, the first time I came to Australia, I wanted to bring in a lot of English things that I'd been doing. Mm-hmm. So I was in WA previously, and I thought, I'm going to change the world in WA because I'm going to do this and this and this. And nobody buys into it because this is how we do it, and we don't do things like this. So I had to learn as well. I actually quite openly failed at it first couple of times, just trying to push people to do things that they weren't used to doing and things that weren't done in the markets over there.
Yeah,
and that was part of my growth as well. I learned quite a lot from it.
Yeah,
it's a bloody frustrating time, to be fair.
So going back then, what's your first memory of working in construction, Lee?
My first real memory is probably the first couple of jobs I did as a site manager. When I very first started, so I started out as a chippy on an apprentice scheme working for a small builder. I was probably 2/3 of the way through, and they offered me a role in the office as a kind of trainee site manager, which I took. But one of my fondest memories in construction was on that site. It was a barn conversion up in the Pennines in the UK, which is very, very wind-torn country, like gale force breezes every single day. And we were doing a barn conversion, digging underpin foundations in frozen clay, like -9 degrees with a wind chill factor at least -30. You wouldn't have been surprised seeing penguins walk past. There was me and 9 other guys there with his little grafting shovels, the little tiny things that you literally stab it into the clay. And that was a very difficult, challenging job, but it was so much fun. It really, really was. That was my first project as a site manager, so it was more than just being on the tools. And again, I failed quite a lot because I'd walk past and I'd see something from a carpentry point of view that wasn't done, and I'd go and do that. But then I'd forget to order stuff that was supposed to come next week for the brickies when they were turning up.
Yeah.
That was a key part of my learning curve, getting shouted at a lot.
Oh, I can imagine. Well, you've got to fail in order to learn, though, haven't you? When I'm trying to...
You learn more from your failures. I'm a big believer in that.
I think I've learned more in the last 12 months through this COVID thing than I have like in the last 5 or 6 years. It's been incredible. So where did you grow up then, Lee?
So I'm from a little town in South Yorkshire called Doncaster, a little mining town. It's one of the areas that was absolutely decimated when Margaret Thatcher shut all the pits. My dad was a miner, but he was a safety netting specialist, like doing all the netting on the roof. He wasn't actually picking the coal out. So when they shut our local pit, we were lucky enough to get offered my dad was lucky enough to get offered a job in Gibraltar. So we moved over there I think we were in Gibraltar for 6 years in the late 90s, late 80s, when quite a lot of stuff happened there. James Bond was filmed there. A couple of IRA's guys got shot there. Queen came. Yeah, and then we came back, and pretty much from that point, I'd always been fascinated with construction and how things come together. And I think it was probably more of the demolition side of it. My mum always used to yell at me for smashing Lego.
Oh, really?
I might still be in the wrong industry.
Yeah, you like to build it, then smash it down.
Pretty much, yeah. The smash it down was the fun part. But then the tidying up never happened either.
Oh, no, I can imagine. I guess you touched on it just a little bit there, Lee, but what was the real sort of driver for you to getting into construction? Was it, because I guess some people fall into these industries. Like, what was your reason?
I'd always wanted to be in construction. I can't quite put my finger on a single reason. I was always fascinated with particularly all the big glassy skyrise buildings and big bridge structures and things like that. So I was quite fascinated with that as a kid and trying to build or replicate it with Lego.
Mm-hmm.
It's varied. It's incredibly varied.
I guess what sort of struggles did you face at the beginning of your career? You touched on it a little bit there about being based on site and working as a site manager. What were those first few years like for you?
The first couple of jobs were a lot of fun, probably because I was pissing around more than actually doing my job.
Yeah.
But kind of, I think it was maybe 18, 19, and I was running quite a large project for the business for a client that we knew very, very well. That involved a lot of, like, we used to carry a lot of guys. We had a lot of chippies, a lot of brickies, plasterers, plumbers, sparkies on the books. But then for the larger jobs, we'd subcontract them in. And I can remember a particular instance of arguing with a sparky and a plasterer, and it was purely a lack of respect from the sparky. He just didn't want to do his job. Mm-hmm. He's got some young punk site manager asking him to do certain things, and he just wanted to cause problems.
Yeah,
that was a big challenge, and I learned a lot from it, more how to talk to people. And I mean, the organisation that I worked for, they weren't very advanced or very structured, and there was no official training of any sort. The father that sorted the business out, he tended to do things by running with an iron fist and screaming and yelling.
Yeah.
I've figured out pretty quickly, being an 18-year-old kid, that's not going to work for me. I'm just going to get a punch in the face.
Yeah.
So I came up with different ways of doing things and arguing with reason and never raising your voice.
Mm.
I learned that very, very young, and I do think that's really helped my career, particularly in the tendering side of things, where it does get very hot and it gets very prickly, and deadlines are deadlines and they never move come hell or high water. If you're running around with your hair on fire, it's not a great sign of leadership.
Yeah, no, you're just right. And I guess when you think back to those times now, Lee, is there anything that you're particularly thankful for? You know, like, are you thankful for having went through those hard days of being based out on site and getting thrown into the deep end?
Definitely. It's easy to sit back and whinge about it and complain, but you learn a lot by doing that. I've had a number of project managers work for me over the years who've just come straight out of university and never really stepped on site, particularly things like QSs as well, client-side QSs. Not that I'm bagging them all, by the way, but a lot of guys come out with a piece of paper proclaiming to be the greatest in the world. And you find there's a fundamental lack of understanding of how things work on site. I can recall doing a project in Manchester. I worked on the Cheetham Tower over there. There was a lot of changes that happened on I think it was a level 70-something or 60-something, a couple of penthouses up there. And we were arguing with this young PQS about how much the stone cost around the entrance for it. It was all book-match stone, so the grain flies all the way through. Mm-hmm. That stuff's generally got about an 80% attrition rate, which means you've got to buy an extra 108. Well, you need to buy 180% to do the wall.
Right.
And he was just arguing and arguing and arguing. Had no real understanding of it. Now, the guys that I were working for, quite frankly, were being a little bit rude to him. It was quite clear to me he didn't understand what the argument was. And I suggested that we just have a walk around site and literally just sat the tiles next to him. And he then started to understand all the tiles that go to waste to be able to get this book match in. The issue went away pretty quickly. Mm-hmm.
It's interesting when you show someone the visual side of things, like when you actually take them to the well and show them that there's no water there.
Yeah. You can't see, but one of my office walls is just completely full of whiteboard, and it's always vandalized. It looks like a kid's just attacked it.
That's awesome. So I guess during those early stages of cutting your teeth in your career, was there anything that you had to change about yourself in terms of like your mindset or priorities or anything like that?
Mindset, a degree of it was more patience. I'll tell you, a lot of it was behaviours that had to change. Coming into construction the way I did, I mean, I can remember being on site and getting a clip round the ear. And that was just the norm then. I mean, it's furthest thing from the norm nowadays, quite rightly as well. I mean, it's not, that's how I learned, that's how that generation learned. And there's better ways of doing it, which we're doing now.
Hmm.
The changes that have happened, I think everyone's just grown into those changes. So I can't put a finger on the answer.
Yeah, no, I understand that completely, but it shows you how much the industry has evolved as well.
Oh, definitely.
I when I left school, I thought I wanted to be an architect, and my old man's a plumber, and he basically used to say to me, like, we throw stones at architects when they come on site, and I guarantee that he did throw stones at architects. Like,
I can imagine, mate. I can imagine.
So how did you get involved in estimating and the pre-contract side of things?
Mate, like a lot of people, just fell into it. So I was working for a large company in the UK, which unfortunately is no longer around, but they were a fantastic organisation with a great culture, a huge organisation, £1 billion a year revenue.
Yep.
I started with them as a site manager, and I met the procurement director, who was basically the pre-construction director. I met him one day walking around site, and he said to me, "You're in the wrong job. Come and see me next week and we'll put you in the right job."
Mm-hmm.
So he put me into bid management, and I couldn't write worth shit. I was a joiner. I convinced things to move with a hammer and a lot of swearing normally. So I needed quite a lot of polishing, but I got into the bid management, programming, and particularly estimating. And it was purely by fluke. There was no design or intention there.
Yeah.
And that was probably more than 15 years ago now. So I spent easily 10 years estimating both in the UK and in Australia. And then just as I've progressed, all these different skills that I've picked up along the way have just kind of shone through. And that's the direction that I've kind of found myself going into.
It's funny how one person can have such a major impact on your life in terms of the direction that you go.
Absolutely. Yeah. And kind of molding that rough diamond.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess, what were the characteristics do you think that he may have seen in you at that time?
I think I was a cheeky little shit, to be honest.
So he was thinking you'd have good sort of communication skills, like maybe.
Pretty much, yeah. Like I kind of taking the piss. He always used to say I could walk into a dark room and light it up just by chatting shit.
Yeah.
Make people laugh. The behaviors that I had fitted to get stuff done on site, but he's saying that's not really where those kind of behaviors offer the best benefit. You really need to be in the front end, engaging with clients, engaging with consultants, subcontractors to get the price in. Those kind of relationships and those behaviors will serve you a lot better in pre-construction than actually in construction.
Yeah.
So I just followed the rabbit down the hole, and then I got offered a role in Australia, and now I live on the Gold Coast. So I'm not going to complain about it.
No, it's fair enough. But it's quite funny, isn't it? Like how you would say, you know, I know you're being a bit of tongue in cheek, but chatting shit. But the reality of it is, like, the communication skills and like emotional intelligence and being able to, you know, read a room or read someone else's current vibe. You know, they're the things that you can't, really hard to teach people, you know, and that's nearly people when companies are hiring, they're nearly buying that, you know.
Yeah, they are, and my current role, that's exactly what they needed. I mean, the organization had a lot of work in a very singular market and very few relationships outside of those markets, and that was my job to change that. So 6 months in, and we're changing the world slowly but surely. And again, you can't measure success in small doses in construction, but there's plenty of demographics to point if you're heading in the right direction or you're chasing a dead end. But everything that we're looking at so far, we're definitely heading in the right direction.
Great. When you've been in these sort of management level roles, Lee, like your estimating manager, pre-contracts manager, how have you went around sort of building a high performing team or you know, a strong company culture?
High performing teams is very simple for me. I never walk into an interview thinking I need to ask an estimator whether he knows how to estimate. I've got to work on the base assumption that he can estimate and he's a competent estimator. A lot of it then is, does he fit the business culturally? I mean, we obviously recruited through yourself a while ago, and I think that was the main question that I kept asking you. Culturally, is he going to fit? Is he going to fit? He is, by the way. Excellent fit.
Yep.
But that's the main thing. You can bring people who aren't 100% into an organization with a good supportive culture, and those people will start very quickly becoming 120, 130%.
Yeah. So you focus on the kind of the character of the individual as opposed to
personality, strengths and weaknesses as well. Obviously, you don't need to discuss that in an open forum. That's things that you can identify and try and mitigate as a manager. The big thing is the cultural fit. You can have the best estimator in the world, but if he's not a team player, if he wants to be a lone superstar, he's going to cause issues and strife, and that's ultimately a bad result.
Are estimators, do they work well in a team?
On a whole, I would say yes, but I have had one or two who didn't and weren't interested. I mean, when I walked into McConnell Dow, we had 5 estimators, and none of them spoke to each other. They were all at completely separate ends of the office. It was it was ridiculous, to be honest.
Yeah.
So one of the first things I did was move everyone into a cluster, so they were all together. Now that upset a few of them, and a few of them did leave the business. But then we brought in new guys, fresh energy, fresh ideas, and we brought it into a cluster. And we had a business that was in a lot of distress, but we had a very high-performing pre-construction team. We had some very solid BD guys. We had some excellent design managers, excellent estimators. We turned the business around in less than 2.5 years, from going through pretty much a $300 million loss and 0 potential revenue opportunities. In 2 years, we turned it around to a profitable $380 million a year business. And it was continuing to grow. We'd identified clients and projects and opportunities, and that pipeline was just growing and growing and growing.
When you mention McConnell Dow, they are traditionally involved in infrastructure. I guess, how have you made that transition between working in civil and working in building? Because not many people do.
It's a slightly different mindset. You tend to find kind of both sides of the equation have a very Robin Hood opinion of civil engineers are civil engineers and they can't do building, and builders have the same opinion. But when you actually put people into this stuff that's outside of the comfort zone, there's one or two ways it goes. They either really enjoy it and jump in kind of both feet first, or they revert back and hate it, and they just become a negative issue in there. My changeover was fascinating because I'm a construction geek. So the first couple of really big roads jobs that I was looking at in WA, I thoroughly enjoyed it. I was learning all kinds of stuff, like the old mantra of learning something new every day. I mean, we moved down to Oricon's office. I had a team of 9 estimators and 3 design managers, all sat in Oricon's office. And I probably had the most interesting 8 or 9 months of my life, just learning so much about freeway design and railway interfaces, all this kind of just interesting stuff for a building geek. Yeah.
See, that's awesome, because there's so many people that I know would love to try and get into the other side of the coin, the horizontal builds or the vertical builds. Does seem to be, it's challenged. You know, there's a bit of a stigma there. Once you're building, you're building.
No, there is, and I've come across it quite a lot previously. I mean, I was approached to go and see a civil business. It was probably 2.5, 3 years ago. And I went to meet these guys, and they were nervous because my CV is a good balance. Like dollar-wise, I've probably done more civil projects than building, but sheer quantum of physical tenders put in, it's more building than civils. These guys were worried about it, and I'm asking, like, why? Why are you worried? The experience is there. Just bring something else to the table. And quite frankly, their mindset I found very closed. Like, well, you're not an engineer, so I don't really think you're going to work here.
That happens all the time.
That, I find it fundamentally wrong, to be honest, but I'm not going to change the world sat here whinging to you.
So what are the 3 non-negotiable characteristics that someone needs to possess when they join your team?
A bit of a personality. There's nothing worse than if you've got a cluster of 4, 5, 6 estimators or any role, 4, 5, 6 guys, and somebody in there doesn't talk, they don't socially interact, they rock up at 9 and just sit and hammer through the keyboard and leave at 5. There's no engagement through people like that, and that can drive quite a negative culture, I've found. Not that person is particularly negative, but just their mindset of, I just want to sit here and purely do my work and not interact with anyone. I mean, I think, what's the statistics? You spend 70% of your grown life at work. Some ridiculous number like that. You need to be able to get on with these people. And if you've got somebody who's culturally not going to be the right fit, it can be very painful and difficult for everyone. And the old adage of it only takes one bad egg, and it really does. I've seen it so many times throughout my career.
Yeah, I've been in offices before as well, where it takes one individual can pass the bucket on to the entire team, and then you've got real problems. Yeah, but you mentioned obviously personalities is one. What would be the other two main characteristics they need to have?
A positive outlook as well, particularly estimators. They do tend to be an interesting bunch. But I've met and interviewed quite a few guys who the glass is never half full. It's probably more half spilt on the floor with a broken glass. You know, you need to estimating by its nature, you lose more than you win. Yeah. So you need to have a very strong positive mindset. Otherwise, people go postal very, very easily.
Yeah. You've got to be resilient, I'd imagine, in estimating, because
you do. I mean, you get kicked an awful lot.
Yeah.
Even if you've got a very successful strike, say 1 in 3, you know, you're losing 2 jobs to everyone that you win. So
absolutely,
you as painful as it is, you almost get used to losing. But the big thing is to really hate that losing factor.
Yeah, you have to have a thick skin at it. I can imagine. In your opinion, then, having worked in these types of senior level roles, but what do you think the main difference is between a manager and a leader?
I don't know if you can recall, but there's a meme that was going around before memes were ever invented, which was just a picture of a guy sat on one of the big Egyptian blocks and he's whipping the slaves, and they were saying that's a manager, whereas the leader's actually out the back and he's pushing.
Yeah.
That speaks volumes for me. I've never been standoffish. If I can see anyone in my team's struggling and I'm leaving at 4:30, 5 o'clock, I'm quite frankly not doing my job.
Yeah.
I think that's always helped me through my career. I've always been just roll the sleeves up and get on with it. If there's any value I can add to anything, I'm more than happy to get involved in it. And I think that kind of mindset has helped me throughout all these different roles that I've had in my career.
Yeah.
So you need to be flexible. You can't have a siloed mentality.
No, for sure, and like you do see it in a lot of these like American films. You know, like these guys who back in the 80s coming into work and just treating everyone like shit, and they're what I
cubicle throwing stuff at them.
Yeah, and just like times have changed now. I don't even know if it's going to it still exists. The need for a good manager still exists in a productivity environment in some ways, but I guess I think it's getting more and more sort of winged out of the industry. Do you find the same?
In my submissions, I very rarely refer to people as managers. I always call them leaders, and leaders inspire people to follow, whereas managers just point and shoot.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now that's not entirely true. I mean, that's a stereotype, but I feel more strongly if somebody says I'm a competent or a good leader opposed to a competent or a good manager.
Obviously, the estimating industry, it's known for being quite full on, and typically that's why estimators are usually at the higher level of the pay scale. What does a typical day look like for you, Lee?
Again, that varies massively. I mean, if you're in the early part of your tender, it's probably a getting end part. It's really then just talking to subcontractors hundreds and hundreds per day.
Yeah.
It's getting into those subbies and talking to them, understanding the scope, where's the risk, where's the danger, how do we address it? Is there a better way of addressing it than just throwing money on the bloody on the estimate? That's a big thing as well that I always put through my teams. That there's always a better way of dealing with risk than just throwing money onto a bid for it.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So the short answer, Mick, is it always changes.
Changes day to day. Well, fair enough. It's the same as me. And I know that you'll obviously have external pressures and family commitments and stuff like that. When you're in the middle of a peak, when you're peak period of time where you're really, really busy, how do you manage that personal commitment and the work that you have to do?
The short answer is I do it quite badly.
Yeah.
My wife is sympathetic and understands, but doesn't excuse it. But I tend to be very deadline focused. Mm-hmm. So I'm now at a stage where I can kind of plan it accordingly because, I'll give you, for instance, I missed going on a lad's holiday once in the UK because I was just so caught up in this tender and like boys are ringing me. We had a 6 o'clock flight to catch one Saturday morning out of Leeds Bradford, and I didn't make it because I was putting this tender in until I think we didn't get it finished until like 2-3 o'clock on the Saturday morning, and then we took it down to the directors for them to sign off. And I ended up missing the flight, missing the holiday. But that was when I was a bit younger and more naive. I tend to be a bit more balanced. Yeah. To the point where there's very rarely where my wife will make dinner and I'm not home to get it.
Well, that's what you've come to Australia for, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, the theme parks and beach life, it's hard. You've always got conflicting deadlines and there's always so many loose ends to sweep up, particularly on the larger jobs. We're targeting stuff now kind of up to the $80 million mark. So there's a lot of moving parts in there and there's always a lot of little bits and pieces to finalize with a submission and with a number. So it is always, it's frantic at the end. And that's really defines whether somebody stays in estimating or not, whether they can handle that. Yeah.
Do you find that a lot of estimators get burnt out?
Look, since I've been in Queensland, I'd probably say not, but my time in WA, particularly with the tier 1 guys, absolutely. Mm-hmm. Some organizations don't deal with it very well. Other organizations do. Mm-hmm. The company I worked for in the UK were incredibly responsive to it, to the point where you would always have to kind of swipe in and out of the office. Mm-hmm. And there would be an alert that went to the director if you were swiping in at 6 a.m. and swiping out at 9 p.m. And that guy he'd come and see you. I can remember him driving down to my house one Sunday, just knocked on the door. We sat there in my bloody underpants watching Match of the Day. Just knock at the door, open the door, and there's the pre-construction director. The fuck? Well, I was panicking. I thought I'd done something massively wrong and he was there to attack me. And I just want to see if you're all right. Like,
oh, really?
I'm a bit nervous, Richard, but
that's quite nice.
Personal touch. Mm. That personal touch completely blew me away. And quite frankly, if I hadn't been given the opportunity to come to Australia, I'd still be working for that guy, no doubt.
Yeah. I think that's what leadership is, though, isn't it? That's the difference. Where I'd imagine
it really is.
I'd imagine like a manager would be sort of just it might not even say good job, where that leader is going the extra mile.
Just keep cracking the whip.
Yeah. What inspires you each day then?
My role now's changed an awful lot. So I now spend probably 50-60% of my life now going and talking to clients and identifying projects for us to pursue. So my driver at the moment is finding those projects before they go to market, mm-hmm. getting them into our door so we can cost plan them and start looking at them and start building the relationships. And being as cynical as I am, I always want to beat my previous employer, so that's the competition that drives me an extra 20-30%.
Oh, that's hilarious. That's do you know what, it's so similar to me. Like I remember I've had, back at the start of my career, I had an interview with Hayes and they took me to 4 interviews and then they rejected me. And it's just been at the bottom of my stomach for the rest of my life that I have to beat Hayes. Like,
that's not, you've got a target. I want to beat them.
Yeah, I know. So I guess on the personal note, if you could have dinner with one person, dead or alive, who would it be, Lee? It's surely not going to be an estimator. Please don't tell me
that. Probably not. I've always been a big fan of kind of natural world leaders, people like Nelson Mandela, and who have really changed the world. So although I think I'd quite like to go for a couple of beers with someone like Barack Obama, just listen to some of the stories he has to tell. But I think if I only had one person to go for dinner with, it'd probably be someone like Nelson Mandela.
No, that's awesome.
Just because I want to find out how he managed to win the World Cup that year. There's no way on God's green earth he should have never done that.
Well, what a leader! He's really redefined, life in
Get
itself.
A nation to follow you.
Yeah,
and you look at some people who are currently in charge of different parts of the world at the moment, and I think anyone mentioning leader in the same paragraph as some of those people is offensive.
Yeah, no, it's so true. I couldn't agree more, Lee. To finish off then, Lee, a few quick fire questions. This is a bit of an interesting one. Be keen to see what you say to this. So if there's one thing you could measure that you currently don't, what would it be? Alcohol consumption, surely.
Don't want to measure that. I'm just going to get depressed. Or how much I spend on it.
Well. Very
I'm
true.
sure my wife measures that. Here's a weird one for you then. Work-life balance. I'd like to measure how well you perform over a year, managing your workload and managing your social life, or your home life at least.
Yeah, I think
it's a bit of a cop-out answer, I think.
No, but it's actually quite a good one though as well, because in reality, I feel like this has been a good year for sort of resetting a little bit, but also what is work and what's not work. When you're sitting home at nighttime and it's you're 9:30 at night or whatever, and you're still checking your emails, like there's got to be some.
Yeah, well,
that's not good.
That's what I'm quite bad at. I mean, I've got a Surface now. I always work on a Surface. I tend to go home a couple of hours with the kids, bedtime stories, things like that, and then just plonk my ass on the couch, and you either just put some crap on TV or you just open the computer. And we're doing some renos at home, and for the last 4 weeks I've been trying to pick tiles, but every time I open the computer, 9, 10, 12 emails just bounce in.
Yeah.
I start responding to that. I still not pick the tiles.
Oh God! Well, you may get picking them, or the missus won't be too happy.
I know the Tyler. I think I'll be all right.
Yeah. What is one book or film that's changed your view on the world?
Can I go back to a previous answer then and take Victus with Nelson Mandela?
We'll do that. That's good. I love it.
In fact, I've got another strange one. I'm not South African, by the way. I just stick with it.
If there was one thing that you could change about the construction industry, what would it be? What for the betterment of the industry?
Diversification, without a doubt. The whole mantra of this industry at the minute of just being a bloke's industry is fundamentally wrong, and it's people not understanding the real benefits. I can say that with a great deal of enthusiasm. I worked for a very successful pre-construction manager out of Melbourne, and she was one of the most inspiring leaders I've ever worked with. And it's not that she had a book full of quotes or anything like that. It was how she went about every single issue and problem that she had. It was just she was so much more methodical and laid out and understanding, and she timed that with going and picking the kids up
Yeah, it's amazing, isn't it?
To and from school, and all these other very, very senior roles, just so unbelievably organized. Like, it actually annoys me how well organized she is. But she was a very fundamental part of my career. The value that she brings to the industry is absolutely phenomenal.
That's fantastic. I think a perfect way to finish off the show. Lee, thank you for joining me on this episode. It's been really insightful. I think that all the listeners out there will get a lot of value from it, mate. So I really appreciate it.
Hopefully I didn't swear too much, mate. I don't have too many blanks to put in there.
No, it's all good. It's all good. I appreciate it, Lee, and thanks very much, and all the best for the rest of your week. Thank you so much for listening to Measured with me, Mick Donaghy. Before you go today, guys, I'm just going to ask you to do one thing. Can you please go to Apple right now or Spotify right now and just give us those 5 stars? Hit that 5-star button. It makes such a difference you wouldn't believe. The whole idea of this show is to inspire, educate, and motivate our listeners. And we can only do that if we're getting the best guests. The best guests want to see data. They want to see information. They want to see how many listeners that we get. And so all of this stuff is really, really important. So if you can just literally go and do that today, if you enjoy the show, just go and hit that 5-star button. It makes such a difference. I hope you've enjoyed the show. We're going to continue to push this out there every Monday. So if you can, hit that 5-star button. And if you can't, even share it with a friend. Go on to WhatsApp, flick it on to your crew. Guys, thank you so much for listening. On to next week.